Next part of Little House in the Big Woods by Laura Ingalls Wilder. Okay. When I left off, they were making cheese. Okay. So Ma cut the rennet into squares and let it stand while the curd separated from the whey. Then she poured it all into a cloth and let the thin yellowish whey drain out. When no more whey dripped from the cloth, Ma emptied the curd into a big pan and salted it, turning it and mixing it well. Laura and Mary were always there, helping all they could. So look, there's Laura helping her mom. Look how nice. They loved to eat the bits of curd when Ma was salting it. It squeaked in their teeth. Under the cherry tree outside the back door, Pa had put up the board to press the cheese on. He had cut 2 grooves the length of the board and laid the board on blocks, one end a little higher than the other. Under the lower end stood an empty pail. Ma put her wooden cheese hoop on the board, spread a clean wet cloth all over the inside of it, and filled it heaping full of the chunks of salted curd. She covered this with another clean wet cloth and laid on top of it a round board cut small enough to go inside the cheese hoop. Then she lifted a heavy rock on top of the board. All day long the round board settled slowly under the weight of the rock, and whey pressed out and ran down the grooves of the board into the pail. Next morning, Ma would take out the round, pale yellow cheese as large as a milk pan. Then she made more curd and filled the cheese hoop again. Every morning she took the new cheese out of the press and trimmed it smooth. She sewed a cloth tightly around it and rubbed the cloth all over with fresh butter. Then she put the cheese on a shelf in the pantry. Every day she wiped every cheese carefully with a wet cloth, then rubbed it all over with fresh butter once more, and laid it down on its other side. After a great many days, the cheese was ripe and there was a hard rind all over it. Ma wrapped each cheese in paper and laid it away on the high shelf. There was nothing more to do with it but eat it. Laura and Mary liked cheese making. They liked to eat the curd that squeaked in their teeth, and they liked to eat the edges Ma pared off the big round yellow cheeses to make them smooth before she sewed them up in the cloth. Ma laughed at them for eating green cheese. The moon is made of green cheese, some people say, she told them. The new cheese did look like the round moon when it came up behind the trees, but it was not green, it was yellow like the moon. It's green, Ma said, because it isn't ripened yet. When it's cured and ripened, it won't be a green cheese. Is the moon really made of green cheese? Laura asked, and Ma laughed. I think people say that because it looks like a green cheese, but appearances are deceiving. Then while she wiped all the green cheeses and rubbed them with butter, she told them about the dead cold moon that's like a little world on which nothing grows. The first day Ma made cheese, Laura tasted the whey. She tasted it without saying anything to Ma, and when Ma turned around and saw her face, Ma laughed. That night, while she was washing the supper dishes and Mary and Laura were wiping them, Ma told Pa that Laura had tasted the whey and didn't like it. You wouldn't starve to death on Ma's whey like old Grimes did on his wife's, Pa said. Laura begged him to tell her about old Grimes. So though Pa was tired, he took his fiddle out of his box and played and sang for Laura. Old Grimes is dead, that good old man. We never shall see him more. He used to wear an old gray coat, all buttoned down before. Old Grimes' wife made skim milk cheese. Old Grimes, he drank the whey. There came an east wind from the west and blew old Grimes away. There you have it, said Pa. She was a mean, tight-fisted woman. If she hadn't skimmed all the milk, a little cream would have run off in the whey, and old Grimes might have staggered along. But she skimmed off every bit of cream, and poor old Grimes got so thin that the wind blew him away, plumb starved to death. Look, there's an illustration. Like, I think they're just making the tail. He's so skinny, like a beanpole, tall and skinny. Pa looked at Ma and said, nobody'd starve to death when you were around, Caroline. Well, no, Ma said. No, Charles, not if you were there to provide for us. Pa was pleased. It was all so pleasant. The doors and windows wide open to the summer evening, the dishes making little cheerful sounds together as Ma washed them and Mary and Laura wiped, and Pa putting away the the fiddle and smiling and whistling softly to himself. After a while, he said, "I'm going over to Henry's tomorrow morning, Caroline, to borrow his grubbing hoe. Those sprouts are getting waist-high around the stumps in the wheat field. A man just has to keep everlasting at it, or the woods will take back the place." Early next morning, he started to walk to Uncle Henry's, but before long he came hurrying back, hitched the horses to the wagon, threw in his axe, the 2 wash tubs, the wash boiler, and all the pans, pails, and wooden buckets there were. "I don't know if I'll need 'em all, Caroline," he said, "but I'd hate to want 'em and not have 'em." "Oh, what is it? What is it?" Laura asked, jumping up and down with excitement. "Pa's found a bee tree. Maybe he'll bring us some honey." It was noon before Pa came driving home. Laura had been watching for him, and she ran out to the wagon as soon as it stopped by the barnyard. But she could not see into it. Pa called, "Caroline, if you'll come take this pail of honey, I'll go on hitch." Ma came out to the wagon disappointed. She said, "Well, Charles, even a pail of honey is something." Then she looked into the wagon and threw up her hands. Pa laughed. All the pails and buckets were heaping full of dripping golden honeycomb. Both tubs were piled full, and so was the wash boiler. Pa and Ma went back and forth, carrying the 2 loaded tubs and the wash boiler and all the buckets and pails into the house. Ma heaped a plate high with the golden pieces and covered all the rest neatly in cloths. For dinner, they all had as much of the delicious honey as they could eat, and Pa told them how he found the bee tree. "I didn't take my gun," he said, "because I wasn't hunting, and now it's summer, there wasn't much danger of meeting trouble. Panthers and bears are so fat this time of year that they're lazy and good-natured. Well, I took a shortcut through the woods, and I nearly ran into a big bear. I came around a clump of underbrush, and there he was, not as far from me as across this room. He looked around at me, and I guess he saw I didn't have a gun. Anyway, he didn't pay any more attention to me. He was standing at the foot of a big tree, and bees were buzzing all around him. They couldn't sting through his thick fur, and he kept brushing them away from his head with one paw. I stood there watching him, and he put the other paw into a hole in the tree and drew it out, all dripping with honey. He licked the honey off his paw and reached in for more. By that time, I had found me a club. I wanted that honey myself. So I made a great racket, banging the club against a tree and yelling. The bear was so fat and so full of honey that he just dropped on all fours and waddled off among the trees. I chased him some distance and got him going fast away from the bee tree, and then I came back for my wagon. All right, so look, there's the bear with his paw in the honey tree, and look, there's all the bees buzzing around. But the bear's fur is so thick, the stings don't bother him. Laura asked him how he got the honey away from the bees. "That was easy," Pa said. "I left the horses back in the woods where they couldn't get stung, and then I chopped the tree down and split it open." "Didn't the bees sting you?" "No," said Pa, "bees never sting me." The whole tree was hollow and filled from top to bottom with honey. The bees must have been storing honey there for years. Some of it was old and dark, but I guess I got enough good, clean honey to last us for a long time. Laura was sorry for the poor bees. She said they worked so hard and now they won't have any honey. But Pa said there was lots of honey left for the bees, and there was another large hollow tree nearby into which they could move. He said it was time they had a clean new home. They would take the old honey he had left in the old tree, make it into fresh new honey, and store it in their new house. They would save every drop of spilled honey and put it away, and they would have plenty of honey again long before winter came. All right, look, now it's chapter 11, Harvest. Pa and Uncle Henry traded work. When the grain got ripe in the fields, Uncle Henry came to work with Pa, and Aunt Polly and all the cousins came to spend the day. Then Pa went to help Uncle Henry cut his grain, and Ma took Laura and Mary and Carrie to spend the day with Aunt Polly. Ma and Aunt Polly worked in the house, and all the cousins played together in the yard until dinner time. Aunt Polly's yard was a fine place to play because the stumps were so thick. The cousins played, jumping from stump to stump without ever touching the ground. Even Laura, who was the littlest, could do this easily in the places where the smallest trees had grown close together. Cousin Charlie was a big boy, going on 11 years old. and he could jump from stump to stump all over the yard. The smaller stumps he could jump two at a time, and he could walk on the top rail of the fence without being afraid. Pa and Uncle Henry were out in the field cutting the oats with cradles. A cradle was a sharp steel blade fastened to a framework of wooden slats that caught and held the stalks of grain when the blade cut them. Pa and Uncle Henry carried the cradles by their long curved handles and swung the blades into the standing oats. When they had cut enough to make a pile, they slid the cut stalks off the slats into neat heaps on the ground. It was hard work walking around and around the field in the hot sun, and with both hands swinging the heavy cradles into the grain and cutting and then sliding it into piles. After all the grain was cut, they must go over the field again. This time they would stoop over each pile and take up the handful of stalks. Look, there they are. Look, there's the pile of the stalks. They would take up a handful of the stalks in each hand, and they would knot them together to make a longer strand. Then, gathering up the pile of grain in their arms, they would bind it tightly around with the band they had made and tie the band and tuck in the ends. After they had made 7 such bundles, then the bundles must be shocked. To make a shock, they stood 5 bundles upright, snugly together with the oat heads up. Then over these they put 2 more bundles, spreading out the stalks to make a little roof and shelter the 5 bundles from dew and rain. Every stalk of the cut grain must always be safely in the shock before dark, for lying on the dewy ground all night would spoil it. Pa and Uncle Henry were working very hard because the air was so heavy and hot and still that they expected rain. The oats were ripe, and if they were not cut and in the shock before rain came, the crop would be lost. Then Uncle Henry's horses would be hungry all winter. At noon, Pa and Uncle Henry came to the house in a great hurry and swallowed their dinner as quickly as they could. Uncle Henry said that Charlie must help them that afternoon. Laura looked at Pa and Uncle Henry said that. When Uncle Henry said that. At home, Pa had said to Ma that Uncle Henry and Aunt Polly spoiled Charlie. When Pa was 11 years old, he had done a good day's work every day in the fields, driving a team. But Charlie did hardly any work at all. Now Uncle Henry said that Charlie must come to the field. He could save them a great deal of water. He could go to the spring. He could save them a great deal of time. He could go to the spring for water, and he could fetch them the water jug when they needed a drink. He could fetch the whetstone when the blades needed sharpening. All the children looked at Charlie. Charlie did not want to go to the field. He wanted to stay in the yard and play, but of course he did not say so. Pa and Uncle Henry did not rest at all. They ate in a hurry and went right back to work, and Charlie went with them. All right, I'm gonna stop right here. I've got my bookmark. Look, just a little bit left. I'm still enjoying this little house in the big woods. Have a great day, first graders. I'm sending you lots of teacher love, and we'll read more next time.